Once upon a time, there was a missionary. He was bright and capable. He was outspoken and well-connected. He was highly educated and well-known. He was also terrible at his job. He had a way of irritating everyone who heard the sound of his voice. It wasn't just the sound of his voice, but the manner in which he spoke, the words he chose, and his timing. People just couldn't stand him. They knew he had good intentions, but he drove them nuts. The first church he visited got together and came up with a plan. "Missionary," they said, "your messages are so powerful, we just can't keep you all to ourselves. We've decided to cut your visit short so we can send you on to visit with other churches." So they did. They sent him to another church where the same thing happened. That church sent him to another church, which was more blunt and just told him to leave. That's when the mentor found him. The mentor was almost the opposite of the missionary. He was understated and reserved, gentle and tactful. He spoke less than the missionary. He was more patient than the missionary, and he was very good at his job. So the mentor took the missionary and found a church that could teach him. The mentor vouched for the missionary and told the church that if they could stick with him, if they could teach him, he would do great things. It didn't last long. He was too bold, too argumentative. They sent him off too. When the mentor heard this, he went out for himself and found the missionary. He took the argumentative missionary under his wing and taught him. They served as preachers and teachers together in the same city for more than a year. More than 1 year. This was the longest anyone had been able to tolerate the missionary in his entire career. And the mentor was just getting warmed up. You see, because of the mentor's teaching, the missionary was starting to grow. He was starting to learn. He discovered not only what to say, but how and when to say it. The mentor's relentless dedication to educating this brash student was slowly starting to pay off. People started to refer to them in one breath, the mentor and the missionary. They were a team, like Batman and Robin. People flocked to hear them. But then things changed. The missionary started to get good, so good, that people remembered him instead of the mentor. Soon people came to hear not the mentor and the missionary, but the missionary and the mentor. And the mentor had to make a decision. He had to decide what he would do when his reputation was surpassed by that of his student. The missionary, horribly unprepared for his work, had been transformed by the mentor's patient and unrelenting dedication to education. People referred to them as one, the mentor and the missionary, but that stopped when the missionary eclipsed his teacher and people came to hear the missionary and the mentor. And the mentor had to decide how he would handle it. And he chose exactly what we would hope. Far from being jealous, he was thrilled. He saw it as a success. He had enabled the missionary to do work that he had never been able to do before. Every person who heard the missionary preach, every person whose life was changed because the mentor had stuck with him. And then they started to travel. They left the church this time not because the church couldn't stand them, but because they needed to reach more people. They decided that it was time for them to reach out. They set their sights on cities around the country and the world. They wanted to reach as many people as they could. The mentor worked with the missionary to make the right connections, to go through the proper channels, to get the right support. They would proceed to travel together for 3 years, going from city to city, proclaiming the Word of God. But first, they had to prepare. And that's when they were joined by the youth. The youth was known not because of his own work, but because of his mother. She was always around the church. Everyone knew her. So when her son was identified to join their travels, the mentor took note. He saw something special in the youth that was worth nurturing. So they set out together, the mentor, the missionary, and the youth. But this new addition would prove to be difficult. In fact, it would spell the end of the alliance between the mentor and the missionary. The missionary had learned his craft from the mentor. Together they had set out on an ambitious journey, one that would span years, and they had taken on a new member of their team, the youth. The youth was known to them mostly because of his mother. Their journey was all that they had hoped. They reached people in unexpected ways and in unexpected places. They came up against a few problems, but nothing seemed to slow them down. They went from city to city, changing the world. But it was too much for the youth. He may have had the potential that the mentor saw, but he was too rough around the edges. He was in over his head. Maybe he just missed home. For whatever reason, the youth gave up. He turned back. Years later, after the journeys were completed, the mentor and the missionary went home as well. They came up with a plan to start out again, and then the mentor spoke up. "I want to take the youth," he said. "Absolutely not," replied the missionary. "He abandoned us before, and we don't have the time or the energy for him." No one knows how the rest of the conversation went. Perhaps the mentor reminded the missionary of another young man in over his head, who went on to become a great missionary. Perhaps not. But when the argument was over, the missionary said, "I am going, and the youth is not coming with me. If you want to work with him so badly, you can't come with me. You have to choose. It's either him or me." "Very well," said the mentor. "You don't need me anymore. I choose him." And that was the end. They parted ways. The missionary found a new partner, and the mentor stayed behind to work with the youth. He knew that it was worth his time and energy. He knew that once again, with some time and attention, the youth could do amazing things. It took time, and it took energy. The mentor had enabled the missionary to fulfill his calling, only to be left behind. He had chosen to work with another young man in need of guidance, and it took time. It also took some serious help. The mentor couldn't do it on his own. He got help from the preacher, from his friends, from the youth's mother, from anyone who could chip in. The youth was bright, capable, and gifted, but he needed time to bring it out. And that was exactly what the mentor could do. Over the years, he helped the youth develop into something no one expected: an artist. More specifically, an author. The youth went on to write a book about his faith. The missionary had published many books, but he was never accused of being an artist. The book written by the youth, on the other hand, was an absolute work of art. It was read and shared. It was sold around the world. It was memorized. It was performed. It was published, and it was quoted. The youth's book became, for many people, the first thing they would ever read about Jesus. His book was read by preachers, politicians, missionaries, teachers, and business people. It was read by soldiers and farmers and athletes and presidents. It went places that the youth would never have been able to go himself. And he wrote it because of the mentor. You know the name of the youth. You know his book. You know the name of the missionary. You know his life story. But you probably don't know the mentor. And he's okay with that. You probably don't know his story. At least, you don't know that you know it. But you will.